Hi everyone, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Chronicles, the series of books and videos on American history as seen through the lives of the presidents of the United States. This episode is from the life of Grover Cleveland, and the focus is peace at Princeton. The year is 1897, and Cleveland has just left the presidency for the second and final time. He's got to figure out what he's going to do and where he's going to go. In terms of location, he wasn't going back to Buffalo, his old hometown. He was completely estranged from that community, and he didn't want to go back to New York City either, which is where he went after his first term in office. He decided to go to a place he'd only been to once before, just recently. Just before the recent election, Cleveland had given a speech at Princeton University. It used to be called the College of New Jersey. After 150 years, just rebranded to name after the town in New Jersey where the university sat. And Cleveland had brought his wife along for the speech, and they really enjoyed themselves. It was kind of a quaint village with a bucolic setting, not too fast-paced, but also had the intellectual stimulation of the university life, as well as the cosmopolitan culture of the faculty, the staff, and the students. And so they decided, after that one short visit, retirement at Princeton, New Jersey. Frances Cleveland went ahead first. She picked out a house. They bought it. They named it Westland after Cleveland's friend, Professor Andrew West, who helped kind of facilitate his transition into the new community. Immediately built a two-story extension. On the bottom floor of that extension was his new billiard room. But what was he going to do in his retirement years? He, like many of his predecessors, bemoaned the fact that the United States didn't really know what to do with its former presidents. Cleveland said, so a fellow has to remain a loafer all the rest of his life simply because he happened to be president? It isn't right. It isn't fair. Fortunately for Cleveland, he didn't have to work. He was financially set for his retirement. He was a little bit lonely at first, making the transition, starting to encourage his friends to come and visit, to stay with them, go on hunting trips and fishing trips. Things were pretty casual around the Cleveland household, except for dinner. Dinner was still formal, and they would still go away for their summers. Gray Gables up at Cape Cod was still their summer getaway. Lots and lots of fishing. What about his memoirs? Would Cleveland take out his pen and write his life story? His answer was no. According to Cleveland, my official acts and public career are public property. There's nothing to say about them. What I did is done, and history must judge of its value, not I. My private life has been so commonplace, there's nothing to write about. At least that's what he thought. He did write two books, though, after his second term in office. One we've talked about previously was a bunch of essays on his favorite outdoor pastimes that he called Fishing and Shooting Sketches. And then there was another book, this one. It was about his presidency. He called it Presidential Problems, but it is not a memoir. It's not a lot of opinions. It's really more of a history lesson, if you will, on some of the key things that he dealt with as president, like the Venezuelan dispute with Britain, the Pullman strike, some of the debt sales, those kinds of topics. Interesting history book of his presidency, but not really what you would consider to be a memoir. Well, the university started becoming increasingly a major focal point for Cleveland in his life. He's a man who had not gone to college. He'd become a very successful lawyer, but never went to college, but he did get an honorary doctorate from Princeton. And then over a course of about a 5-year period, he gave a bunch of lectures, a series that he called Leadership in Public Affairs, which was very popular on campus. He always had his customary seat next to the university president on commencement day, and he and his wife Frances almost never missed a home football game. There were only two Democrats elected President of the United States over about a 75-year period of time, from 1856 to 1932. And both of them right now are at Princeton University. Grover Cleveland in retirement and with Woodrow Wilson, who is a professor there. Now, they were not really friendly at the time. In fact, they sort of didn't see eye to eye politically. There was some respect there, but Cleveland kind of kept his distance from Wilson. But when Cleveland actually accepted the job as a university trustee, he was involved in picking Wilson to be the new university president. But then they kind of got at odds, where Wilson wanted to take the school in a new direction with a new graduate school. Cleveland wasn't really aligned with this, so they had their testy moments together. By and large, it was a respectful but kind of distant relationship for these two Democratic former and future presidents. What about his personal life? Well, the marriage to Frances Cleveland continued to be the light of his life, despite their odd history together prior to their marriage and their tremendous age difference. This was a happy marriage, as we've said before, possibly the happiest in the history of the presidency. They got along great with their young family. They left the White House with 3 children, and pretty soon they added 2 more. Richard was born in 1897. Frances came along in 1903. Now, Grover Cleveland was 66 years old when his last child was born. He looks more like a grandpa than he does a father, but he still had plenty of time for the kids, both inside the home and also, of course, teaching them about the great outdoors. There was the family tragedy, though, the one lone tragedy in the life of the parents of Grover and Frances Cleveland, and it had to do with their first child, their daughter, Ruth. When Ruth Cleveland was born 12 years before, she was America's child, celebrated across the country. They named the candy bar the Baby Ruth after her. But now, here in 1904, she became ill, and she went downhill fast, from tonsillitis to diphtheria to death in a 4-day period of time. A tragedy. Both parents were heartbroken. Several months later, Cleveland still wrote in a letter that we still miss dreadfully our dear Ruth. But I believe there has been given to both Frank and me such confident faith that it is well with her, and such a feeling that we are the only losers, as seems to be a very great comfort to us. But it was so difficult, in fact, that they decided really to stop going to Gray Gables, their summer getaway, because there were too many memories of Ruth there. They decided to buy another house in Tamworth, New Hampshire, which became their summer getaway instead. What about politics? Well, mostly Cleveland kept his opinions to himself. He was pleased that his successor, the Republican from the opposite party, William McKinley, had stuck to the gold standard, his sound currency policy, which Cleveland thought was the most important thing going on in the country at the time. He and McKinley were completely at odds on other topics like the tariff. McKinley had been pro-high tariff before. In his presidency, he signed into law the Dingley tariff, which went even higher. Cleveland didn't care for that, nor did he care when his successor McKinley took the United States into war with Spain over Cuba. Cleveland didn't approve of that as well, but frankly, he was much more distraught about his own party than he was about the Republicans, because the Democrats continued to rally around William Jennings Bryan, and Cleveland did not care for. His issue had migrated from silver now to anti-imperialism, anything to attack the Republicans and McKinley. But frankly, Cleveland was more comfortable with McKinley than he was with Bryan, and was perfectly happy when McKinley won the rematch between the two in 1900. What about the election of 1904, though? Because over the next few years, in the intervening few years, the feeling of Cleveland in the Democratic Party started to change again. Remember, he had been their standard bearer for 3 consecutive elections, twice winning the presidency, but very unpopular in his last couple of years of that second term with the Democrats, many of whom did not like his economic policies, particularly about the currency, and basically he was become a pariah in the party. But you know, things come and go, and times begin to change back to where they were, and in 1904, there was a lot of nostalgia for Grover Cleveland. The staunch reformer who was always trying to do the right thing for his country. Maybe we'll go to him, put him up again for the presidency, even though he's 67 years old. Grover Cleveland shut this down fast. He had no interest in getting back into politics. He told a newspaper that my determination not to do so was unalterable and conclusive. So that put that to the end. But did Grover Cleveland miss the presidency? And here's an interesting insight, because despite all the toll, all the difficulties that he suffered personally through this, yes, he missed the presidency. He wrote an article for the American magazine that was published shortly after his death, in which he said that a sensitive man is not happy as president. It is fight, fight, fight all the time. I look forward to the close of my term as a happy release from care. But I'm not sure I wasn't more unhappy out of office than in. A term in the presidency accustoms a man to great duties. He gets used to handling tremendous enterprises, to organizing forces that may affect at once and directly the welfare of the world. After the long exercise of power, the ordinary affairs of life seem petty and commonplace. I miss the strain, the spur of constant thinking, the consciousness of power, the knowledge I was acting for 70 million people. A very honest reflection from Grover Cleveland. Well, as he was starting to become more popular again, started accepting more speaking opportunities, now being welcomed with applause, which kind of new to him, and it felt good. He enjoyed it. When he appeared with the current president, Theodore Roosevelt, at the St. Louis World's Fair, his applause was louder than the current president, something that certainly made him smile. Grover Cleveland had one more service to provide for his country, and it was in the world of business. The life assurance industry was suffering from scandals from some of the top firms. It needed an infusion of credibility. So in May of 1905, when Thomas Ryan bought the Equitable, one of the largest of these life assurance companies, he decided he wanted some new trustees to help bring on a new board, and he needed people with impeccable reputations. So he reached out to Morgan O'Brien, George Westinghouse, and Grover Cleveland. And this threesome came together. They took it very seriously, not only for the Equitable, but started dealing with some of the other firms who were going through some of the same kind of challenges. This was well received by Cleveland as he kind of became the public's representative for the entire industry. It was a very nice piece of work and a service to help bring stability to an important part of the economy while he was sort of off in retirement, still finding a way to serve. At this point, well, age is catching up with him and he starts to wind down. The students at Princeton would still come along each year and serenade him on his birthday. He's still getting letters of sort of gratitude for his service to the country, one of which came from Mark Twain, who had taken an interest and had opinions about many presidents through his lifetime. He wrote to Cleveland that your patriotic virtues have won for you the homage of half the nation and the enmity of the other half. This places your character as a citizen upon a summit as high as Washington's. Always interesting placement of ideas from Mark Twain. Shortly after his 71st birthday, Cleveland really started to suffer health problems. He had heart and kidney disease, chronic gastroenteritis, and eventually he died of heart failure June 24th of 1908. There was only a small ceremony. That's as he wanted it. There was no eulogy, although the president, Theodore Roosevelt, did come. Other dignitaries as well to pay their respects, but it was a small group by design. As for Frances Cleveland, well, she would remarry about 5 years later, and she would live 40 years after Cleveland, but she would be interned in the Princeton Cemetery right next to her first husband for eternity. The last words for Grover Cleveland were, "I have tried so hard to do right." I have tried so hard to do right, and those were fitting last words for Grover Cleveland. Look, he was often unpopular. He took on real challenges and things that were popular at the time, but he was committed to that sort of moral compass, his own personal sense of right and wrong, and when it came to political reform, even if it was unpopular, he pursued it as aggressively as he could. The New York Times put it this way: personal glory never allured him. His contentment in the modest performance of duty and his indifference to adulation and the splendor of power left him at all times free to follow the honest convictions of his trained mind. He professed no mastery over the views and acts of his countrymen because he was one of them. With them, the embodiment of the spirit of the American people, just straightforward. Just straightforward. This was no means easy for Grover Cleveland. He most of the time did not pursue political office. It came after him from the people who wanted reform. He took up that mantle, but again, it was often bucking the trends and bucking popularity, so his popularity would certainly wane, but it wouldn't deter him, because as he said in his dying words, he never failed to try so hard to do right. Those are fitting final words for Grover Cleveland. That is Grover Cleveland. And Peace at Princeton, from the life of Grover Cleveland. For more Presidential Chronicles, check out my books on Amazon.com. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Chronicles.